At the weekend, I was lucky enough to attend the Hammerhead War Games show at the Newark Showground in Nottinghamshire. Newark has several attractions to offer the military historian or wargamer. There's a substantial castle, heavily ruined but still there, in the centre of town. In fact, it's where King John actually died. Round the corner from the castle, there is a large church which features a shot hole in the wall which was hit by a cannonball during one of the sieges of Newark. Outside of Newark, there's an English Civil War earthwork called a sconce, and further out is the last major Wars of the Roses battlefield, which is the Battle of East Stoke, 1487. I'll refer to all of these later. However, in the centre of town, there is the National Civil War Centre. Now, this had me a little bit confused when I turned up, because I've always been taught it's the English Civil War, and we call it the English Civil War to prevent confusion with the American Civil War, because the Americans tend to just call it the Civil War. So I was a bit puzzled to turn up and see the sign now says National Civil War Centre. Took me a bit of pondering to realise, of course, English Civil War is very Anglo-centric, when of course Scotland, Wales and particularly Ireland were particularly badly hit during the so-called English Civil War, what with the attacks on Catholic communities and pogroms perpetrated by the parliamentarian forces led by Oliver Cromwell. One could see that the Irish and the Scots might object to the term English Civil War, so we're now calling it the National Civil War Centre. So let's step inside and see what there is. The museum is spread over several levels and shares an entrance with the local theatre. Here we see examples of breastplates, helmets, swords, etc. of the period. There is a cinema located behind where I'm standing here, which shows periodic films about the Civil War experience, various artifacts, and above we have reproduction banners, regimental banners for units that fought during the Civil War. You'll see examples there of several nations including Scotland. Here we have a reproduction of a plague doctor's costume worn to protect him while dealing with patients suffering from the bubonic plague or Black Death. Newark was heavily defended by the Royalists during the Civil War, not only with a barrier or outer wall, including part of the castle, but also detached earthworks called sconces. And here we have an example. One of these still survives today in the local park, the Queen's Sconce. It's a sort of star-shaped fort. A lot of earthworks. You'll see circular potholes, pitfalls, potholes, which were very similar to what the Romans put around their forts in the 1st and 2nd century AD. Same thing, same idea. It broke the force of a charge. Inside you've got heavy guns and anti-escalade palisades positioned to stop people from climbing up the bank. So this is a section of the surviving Queen's Sconce. Here we have the example of pikeman's armour. It's a breastplate with large tassets. There's a morion helmet, and this is the sort of thing that, if you were lucky, a well-equipped pikeman might carry. However, there's considerable amount of evidence that much of this armour was discarded. Perhaps they got rid of the tassets and just kept the breastplate. And because of the speed with which armies were raised, not necessarily all pikemen received their armour. This is a good example, but don't think of it as typical. This is a good example of a typical cavalryman's equipment. A buff leather jacket, breastplate underneath, and then a lobster pot helm to protect the head. The bars protected the face from being slashed, but obviously if you were stabbed in the face or shot in the face, little protection. But it did allow you to breathe and see what was going on around you. So it probably represented a good combination of protection plus wearability. Here we have a still shot of the banners hanging above the main hall. Each regiment will be divided into several companies, and typically each company carried a variation of the main standard. You see the English ones there have red and white crosses, and I believe the nearest dark blue with the white diagonal cross is actually Scottish. That's the Saltire of St Andrew. Just a quick plug from me: if you're enjoying this, please leave me a thumbs up, and if you're really enjoying this, please feel free to subscribe. This nasty piece of kit is the sort of hand warmer you don't want to see on a cold day. It's been interpreted as a punishment device for thieves or deserters. It's in the shape of a left hand, obviously thumbs on the right, and it's speculated that it was heated up to red heat, and then the hand of an offender was pressed down into it. The needles, the sharp bits there, would burn into the skin, and it would leave the left hand permanently marked as a deserter, thief, perjurer, whatever it is they're punishing you against. So it's the sort of hand warmer you don't want to see. Exhibits in another part of the gallery include documents, a musket, a picture, and here a very rare statue of King Charles I. Many of these were destroyed when the Parliament eventually won the Civil War, and indeed it's very rare to find a Charles I royal coat of arms hanging up in any church. The only one I've ever seen had in fact been hidden by the parishioners until Charles II was restored. Another rarity is this pottery or earthenware grenade. It could be filled with gunpowder and thrown as an exploding grenade, or alternatively it could be filled with combustibles in the manner of Greek fire, etc., and hurled into a building. And there is a reference elsewhere in the museum to the fact that somebody in the town had his house actually burned down by one of these. So we do know they were used in Newark. As a Wars of the Roses historian and a former employee of the Royal Artillery Museum at Woolwich, I did have to take issue with this one. It's described as a stone cannonball, more properly a round shot, found at East Stoke. Now East Stoke is a 1487 Wars of the Roses battle. Yes, artillery was used, and this is almost certainly a Wars of the Roses round shot, not a Civil War round shot. And I did raise this with a member of staff, and I will raise it with them again by email later. So, slap on the wrist here, this is definitely not in the Civil War. And as if to emphasise my previous point, in an adjacent gallery we have other items of Newark history, and this poor chap is a victim of the 1487 Battle of East Stoke. His injuries resemble closely those of the 40 or 50 men found at the Towton Grave Pit from 1461. As you can see, his face has been substantially stoved in, and he also has head injuries around the rest of the cranium, which suggests he may have been running for the battle and actually had his helmet off. Some 11 bodies were found there in the 1980s, and this is unfortunately the remains of one of them. It's a grim way to go, and it's an indication of just how savage some of the fighting was at 1487 Battle of Stoke. One of the last galleries I visited at the Newark Civil War Museum, in fact, featured some World War II history. An upper room has been set aside to commemorate the Polish contribution to World War II. There is a large Polish cemetery just outside of Newark, and we had examples of Polish national costume and some indication of the Polish contribution to the struggle in the Second World War. If you get a chance to visit Newark in Nottinghamshire, I can recommend the National Civil War Centre. In addition, we have the castle down by the river. We have the Queen's Sconce, one of the best preserved English Civil War earthworks in Britain. And we even have the last Wars of the Roses battle out at East Stoke. It's only 5 or 6 miles away. They have put some decent signs out. You can find it. It's worth a visit. So give Newark a look, and if you poke around the town you'll find all sorts of interesting things. I even found a pagan church. Yes, believe it or not, they have a pagan church. Check it out, check out the town, see what you think.
This has been a Warspite production. If you've enjoyed this, please leave a thumbs up. If you've really enjoyed it, please feel free to subscribe. I look forward to seeing you next time. This is Warspite out, and have a very good day.